Welcome to the channel where we dive deep into the fascinating world of rare coins, hidden treasures, and unbelievable stories from the past that turn ordinary-looking pieces of change into multi-million-dollar collectibles. And today we are going to unravel one of the most astonishing tales in numismatics, the 1944 wheat penny that has been valued at a staggering $355 million. A figure that seems almost impossible for a small copper coin, yet it becomes more understandable once we examine the history, the errors, the minting mistakes, and the rarity that combine to make this coin one of the most extraordinary items ever known in the coin collecting community. And for those of you watching who might have a jar of old pennies sitting at home, this story could inspire you to take a second look at every coin you own, because you never know if a small detail could turn into a life-changing discovery. So let's begin by talking about the historical context of 1944, a year during World War II, when the United States Mint was under incredible pressure to balance resources, production, and national needs, because during 1943 the government had shifted from copper pennies to steel pennies coated with zinc in order to conserve copper for ammunition, wiring, and other war-related essentials, which meant that the 1943 pennies looked completely different from the standard bronze Lincoln cents, and caused massive public confusion, as many people thought the steel pennies were dimes. Yet by 1944 the Mint returned to producing coins mostly in copper, melting down shell casings from the war effort to recycle the material into coins, and in that chaotic process of transitioning back, some extraordinary minting mistakes happened, giving rise to the legend of the 1944 wheat penny worth hundreds of millions. Because what makes a coin so incredibly valuable is not just age or design, but era rarity, historical background, and collector demand colliding in ways that only happen once in a generation. So when we talk about the $355 million valuation, it stems from the extreme scarcity of certain era varieties, like the 1944 steel penny struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, which resulted when leftover steel planchets from 1943 accidentally got struck with 1944 dies, creating a hybrid coin that should not exist. And it's these accidental survival pieces that collectors crave because they are anomalies, mistakes that escape detection. And each one represents a mystery of how such errors happen despite the Mint's strict quality controls. And while most 1944 pennies are common, billions were minted in copper and bronze, there are a tiny handful of 1944 steel pennies known to exist, with only about 25 or so across all mints. And when these appear in auctions, their value skyrockets because of competition among wealthy collectors who want to own a piece of American history that is nearly mythical in its rarity. And the story doesn't stop there, because within the 1944 pennies there are also double die errors, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and transitional composition mistakes where the wrong metal was used, each of which adds layers of intrigue and potential value. And when one of these rarest of the rare 1,944 coins surfaces in pristine uncirculated condition with full mint luster, flawless surfaces, and sharp strike, its price goes far beyond imagination. And that is where we find the mythical $355 million coin, because in the world of high-end collectors, rarity combined with condition creates a perfect storm of demand. And when billionaires, museums, and elite numismatists bid against each other, values climb to astronomical heights. But let's dig deeper into what exactly makes the 1944 penny so unique, starting with the transition year phenomenon. Because 1943 was steel and 1944 returned to copper, yet some of those leftover steel blanks found their way into presses in 1944 and got struck as Lincoln wheat pennies, and those few coins are now legends. And imagine holding a penny that looks like a silver-colored steel cent but has the date 1944. It would stand out instantly to any trained eye because everyone knows 1944 cents were supposed to be bronze. So the discovery of even one steel version shocked the community. And to add to that, There are extremely rare transitional off-metal strikes like 1944 pennies struck on dime planchets or on shell casing. Brass planchets that were slightly different in alloy mix, each mistake creating a coin that simply should not exist, and collectors assign astronomical value to them because they embody a once-in-a-lifetime accident. Now consider also the errors in striking, such as double strikes where the coin was struck twice and shows overlapping images, or off-center strikes where the design is misaligned, or die cracks and cuts that show raised blobs of metal from broken dies, all of which make a coin unique and sought after. But the crown jewel remains the 1944 steel cent, which is the holy grail for penny hunters. And while most of these coins sell for tens or hundreds of thousands at major auctions, the idea of one in absolutely perfect condition with flawless surfaces has pushed valuation estimates into hundreds of millions, because such a coin is not just a piece of money, but a piece of art, a relic of wartime history, and a symbol of the unpredictable nature of minting. So when we say $355 million, we are talking about the theoretical pinnacle of value that can be achieved when rarity, condition, demand, and historical significance collide perfectly. And while the average person may think of a penny as something you drop on the sidewalk without thought, to collectors this single coin could represent a lifetime of searching, bidding, and investing. And its legend continues to grow with every story told, with every collector's dream of finding one in change, with every auction that sets a new record. And think about the possibilities. You could open an old coin jar and find a 1944 penny. At first glance it looks normal, but maybe it's struck on a steel planchet, or maybe it has a double die obverse where Lincoln's profile shows doubling, or perhaps the mint mark has been repunched, creating a tiny visible error. And suddenly what looked like an ordinary cent turns out to be worth life-changing money. And that is the magic of coin collecting, the possibility that the smallest detail can create the biggest reward. And in the case of the 1944 wheat penny, it is the ultimate example of how a tiny copper or steel disc, only 19 millimeters wide, can embody mystery, history, and fortune. And while thousands of collectors dedicate years of their lives to hunting for one of these legendary pieces, the knowledge that one exists valued at $355 million makes the chase even more exciting, because it proves that the dream is real and that history can hide treasures in the most ordinary places. So whether it is because of off-metal transitional errors, double strikes, minting irregularities, or the simple survival of a coin that never should have been minted, the 1944 penny stands as a testament to the fact that mistakes sometimes create perfection in the eyes of collectors, and for those who understand the nuance of numismatics. This coin is not just valuable in dollars, but priceless as a story of America's wartime resilience, minting quirks, and the unpredictability of history. And as we explore every angle of its errors, from steel planchets that slipped through presses, to shell casing coppers that had slight alloy variations, to double dies and mint-marked peculiarities, we see that each mistake is like a fingerprint that makes a coin one of a kind. And that uniqueness is exactly what drives collectors wild, because in a world where billions of coins look identical, the one that stands out becomes a superstar. And the 1944 wheat penny that costs $355 million is the ultimate superstar of them all, embodying every possible factor that makes a coin valuable: historical rarity, minting mistake, survival against odds, condition perfection, and collector demand. And it continues to capture the imagination of anyone who hears its story, because at the end of the day, it is not just about money. It is about the thrill of discovery, the connection to history, and the wonder that something so small could mean so much. So as you keep watching and perhaps even check your own pennies, remember that the next big discovery could be waiting right in your hand, just like the 1944 wheat penny that became one of the most expensive coins in the world. Next, 1951 wheat penny. Today, as we dive deep into the fascinating world of rare and valuable coins, and in particular one of the most intriguing stories surrounding a coin that on the surface may look like just another ordinary cent from the mid-20th century, but in reality has captivated collectors, historians, and investors alike because of its rarity, its mistakes, and the sheer fortune it has commanded at auctions. And that coin is none other than the 1951 wheat penny, which has shocked the coin collecting community with a value estimated as high as $6 million thanks to its unique combination of errors, die varieties, minting anomalies, and the mystery of how such a coin could survive in circulation for so long. So let's begin unraveling the incredible tale of why this small piece of copper is worth such big money, and what makes it so valuable, because when we talk about coins like the 1951 wheat penny, we are not just talking about metal and mint marks, but about the history, the story behind the mistakes, the collectors who chase after them, and the fascinating possibilities that surround the creation of such rarities. And when it comes to the 1951 wheat penny, there are several elements that add to its mystique, starting with the fact that while wheat pennies were produced in large numbers between 1909 and 1958, certain years and mint marks stand out due to production mishaps, doubled dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, planchet errors, and transitional compositions. And the 1951 issue in particular has given rise to multiple anomalies that set it apart from the vast majority of ordinary cents. And this is where the story becomes truly interesting, because although billions of wheat pennies were made over the years, only a handful emerge with the types of dramatic errors that make collectors go wild. And in the case of this legendary 1951 penny, the value skyrocketed due to a combination of dramatic doubling on the obverse side, where Lincoln's portrait shows a striking shadow-like effect from die misalignment, a repunched mint mark on certain Denver struck issues, where the D appears layered or crooked under magnification, and an unusual planchet anomaly, where the copper alloy mix created an odd texture and even color shifts on the surface of the coin. And when you combine those unusual characteristics with pristine preservation of the coin in mint state condition, what you get is a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that sends shockwaves through the auction houses and commands a price of millions. And collectors understand that it is not just the coin itself, but the narrative of rarity that drives the value, because coins like this are the stuff of dreams, the kind of piece that changes hands only a few times in history, and each time it does, the value climbs higher as more investors recognize the cultural and historical significance of owning it. And to fully appreciate why a 1951 wheat penny could fetch such an astounding sum, we need to look deeper into the kinds of minting mistakes that add exponential value, such as double die obverse varieties where the date and inscriptions like Liberty or In God We Trust appear with strong shadowing due to the hub striking the die twice out of alignment, or repunched mint marks, which occur when the mint worker had to punch the D or S into the die more than once and failed to perfectly align the attempts, leaving traces of overlapping letters, or off-center strikes where the coin design is shifted noticeably, leaving a blank crescent of metal along one edge, or broad strike errors where the collar failed and the coin spreads out wider than normal. And then there are transitional errors, which are extremely rare and happen when a coin is accidentally struck on the wrong type of metal blank from another denomination, and in some cases even foreign planchets get mixed into the presses. And there are reports of certain 1951 cents struck on dime planchets or foreign copper blanks, which immediately makes them the kind of treasure that advanced collectors pay astronomical prices for. And what really drives the allure of this 1951 cent is the fact that while mint errors can occur in any year, the combination of multiple distinct errors on a single coin is what turns a curiosity into a jackpot. And when a high-grade example survives with luster and sharp details intact, grading services like PCGS or NGC encapsulate it with a rare error designation, which then becomes a trophy piece for a registry set or private collection. And stories circulate about wealthy buyers who spare no expense to add such a gem to their vault, fueling the legend of the multi-million $1,951 penny. And beyond the technical errors, there are also historical factors to consider, such as the fact that 1951 was part of the post-war era when the U.S. Mint was still adjusting to production demands and occasionally quality control slipped, which explains how unusual strikes could escape into circulation, and those coins that somehow avoided being melted, worn down, or lost are today revered as survivors against the odds. And when we talk about their value, we are not only talking about rarity, but about desirability, because in the world of numismatics, demand often outweighs supply. And when a handful of collectors compete for a single coin at auction, the price can skyrocket far beyond logical expectations, which is exactly what happened with the most famous 1951 wheat penny error that eventually sold for an astonishing $6 million. And while some might think it is unbelievable that a cent could be worth that much, seasoned collectors know that numismatic history is filled with examples where small copper or silver coins reach staggering prices due to rarity, provenance, or error variety, just as we see with the 1943 copper cent, the 1913 Liberty nickel, and the 1804 silver dollar, and the 1951 penny is rightfully joined that elite club because it tells a story of chance, mistake, survival, and discovery. And when you imagine a coin that may have once passed casually through the hands of someone buying a newspaper or candy bar in the 1950s only to later be discovered as a multi-million-dollar rarity, it underscores the magic of coin collecting and the reason so many people check their change, search through rolls, and study varieties, hoping to find the next hidden gem. And with the 1951 wheat penny, the possibilities extend beyond known errors, because experts still debate whether additional undiscovered varieties exist, with ongoing searches for proof strikes that might have slipped out with anomalies, or for unreported double denominations where a cent was accidentally struck over another coin. And this sense of mystery keeps the hunt alive and adds intangible value, because the legend grows with each new rumor or discovery, making the 1951 wheat penny not just a piece of money, but a piece of history, a work of accidental art, and a symbol of the incredible fortunes that can be made in numismatics. And as we explore every facet of its story, we realize that it is not just the physical coin that commands $6 million, but the fascination, the bidding wars, the bragging rights, and the prestige of ownership, because only a handful of people in the world can say they hold one of the rarest and most valuable pennies ever created. And that exclusivity is priceless in itself. So when you hear about a 1951 wheat penny worth millions, remember that behind that headline lies a perfect storm of mint errors, survival against the odds, collector demand, and historical intrigue, all wrapped up in a tiny 1-cent piece that forever changed the perception of what small change can be worth. And that is why the legend of the 1951 wheat penny continues to inspire collectors and treasure hunters to this very day. Because you never know when the next pocket find might turn out to be the next multi-million-dollar rarity waiting to make history all over again. Next, 1951's wheat penny. Today, as we dive into the amazing world of rare and valuable coins where everyday pieces of change can turn into treasures worth unimaginable amounts of money. And today, we are going to take a deep look at one of the most fascinating coins in American history, the 1951's wheat penny. A coin that under normal circumstances is worth just 1 cent, but because of extraordinary errors and mistakes it has reached the legendary value of $5 million at auction. And we will explore in detail why this particular penny from the San Francisco Mint has become so special, what errors and anomalies make it worth so much, how collectors view it, what possibilities exist in its creation, and why this small copper coin commands such awe and attention. And as we go on this journey together, you will see how minting errors like doubled dies, off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, die cracks, filled dies, broad strikes, transitional planchet mistakes, lamination flaws, and even wrong metal strikes can all play a part in turning a simple coin into a multi-million-dollar treasure. So sit back and imagine the story of the 1951's penny, minted in an era when the United States was recovering from World War II, the economy was booming, and millions of wheat cents were produced at the San Francisco Mint. Yet among these countless pennies, a few extraordinary mistakes slipped through mistakes that would change numismatic history forever, because when collectors decades later began to notice subtle yet dramatic differences in certain 1951 sweet pennies, they realized these errors were unlike anything else, and scarcity combined with mystery and beauty drove their values sky high. So let's start with the most famous kind of error, the doubled die, where the obverse or reverse design appears doubled because of a misalignment during the hubbing process. Imagine looking at the words Liberty or I in God We Trust on a 1951 sweet penny and seeing ghost-like shadow letters right next to the originals, or looking at the date 1951 and noticing a distinct doubling, and such dramatic doubled dies are among the most sought-after errors in all of coin collecting, with past examples like the 1955 doubled die cent selling for tens of thousands. So a dramatic doubled die on a 1951s could easily push value into the millions. And in fact, this is one of the major reasons the 1951s error penny has been so heavily desired. Now think about repunched mint marks, another popular type of error that occurs when the letter S mint mark was hand-punched into the die more than once at slightly different angles, creating a doubled or even tripled appearance of the S. And since mint mark varieties are beloved by collectors, having a rare RPM on a coin like the 1951 sweet penny adds significantly to its allure, especially when combined with other errors. And then, there are off-center strikes where the design is not centered on the coin, but shifted, leaving part of the planchet blank and part distorted, and these types of errors are eye-catching and instantly identifiable, and the more dramatic the off-center strike, the more valuable the coin becomes, especially if the date and mint mark remain visible. Now consider the possibility of a broad strike error where the coin was struck without the collar that normally holds it in shape, resulting in a stretched, distorted coin with no rim. And these odd-looking mistakes fascinate collectors because they show the raw power of the minting press. And on a 1951 sweet penny, a broad strike error would make it unique and highly sought after. And then we have die cracks, raised lines that appear on coins when the die itself begins to fracture under pressure, and these cracks can look like lightning bolts or rivers across the coin. And dramatic die cracks are often called retain cut errors if pieces of the die break off entirely. And such errors on a 1951 penny would make it stand out as a striking example of minting imperfection. And another fascinating error type is struck through debris or grease, where foreign material like grease, metal shavings, or cloth gets in between the die and planchet, causing parts of the design to vanish or look smeared. And when this happens on key areas of the design, it can produce spectacular results. Imagine a 1951 sweet penny with parts of the reverse wheat stalks completely missing because grease blocked the die, and such an error would become one of a kind. Now perhaps the most exciting possibility of all is a wrong planchet strike, where a penny was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, like a dime or foreign coin planchet, which results in a coin of the wrong weight, thickness, and color. And examples of this type of error have always sold for extraordinary amounts because they are so rare. So if a 1951 penny was struck on a silver dime planchet or some transitional experimental metal, it would be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery easily worth millions. And that is how we get to the staggering $5 million valuation for certain 1951 error pennies, because rarity, uniqueness, condition, and collector demand all come together to drive the price sky high. And when one of these coins in pristine condition graded by a top service like PCGS or NGC appears at auction, collectors with deep pockets compete fiercely, pushing bids higher and higher until records are shattered. Now let's also consider historical context, because 1951 was deep in the wheat penny era, which ran from 1909 until 1958, and these coins already carry nostalgic appeal for generations of collectors, representing an earlier time in American history. And pennies from the San Francisco Mint are often scarcer than their Philadelphia and Denver counterparts, making the S mint mark important. And when you add dramatic mint errors to a scarcer mint, you end up with coins that are not only numismatically significant but also highly desirable investment pieces. And this is exactly what happened with the 1951 wheat penny error that skyrocketed in value to $5 million. And beyond the specific errors, condition plays a huge role, because a coin in uncirculated red condition with its full mint luster preserved is exponentially more valuable than one that has circulated and turned brown. So when you combine rare errors with pristine condition, you get the recipe for astronomical value. And think about how thrilling it would be to stumble upon such a coin in an old coin jar or inherited collection, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance but on closer inspection reveals doubling in RPM or other mistakes that mark it as one of the most valuable coins ever produced. And that possibility is what drives collectors and treasure hunters to carefully examine every wheat penny they encounter, hoping to find the jackpot coin. And the story of the 1951 penny is a reminder that incredible value can be hidden in the most humble places, and the fascination with such coins comes not just from their monetary value, but also from the idea that human imperfection, machine error, and historical circumstance can combine to produce something unique and irreplaceable, and this uniqueness is the essence of numismatics, where rarity equals value. And as stories of million-dollar pennies spread through the media, more and more people are inspired to take a closer look at their change, creating new generations of collectors and ensuring that coins like the 1951 era penny remain legendary. And the beauty of it all is that every error tells a story, every mistake is a window into the minting process, and every rare coin is a time capsule from the past. And when we talk about the 1951 penny being worth $5 million, we are really talking about the convergence of history, error, rarity, and human passion, because collectors are not just buying a piece of metal, they are buying the story behind it, the knowledge that they own something unique in the entire world, and that is what makes such coins priceless. So the next time you see a wheat penny with an S mint mark, don't dismiss it as just another old coin, because hidden among them could be one of the rarest treasures of all time, a 1951 wheat penny with dramatic errors worth $5 million. And the very thought of that possibility is what keeps the excitement alive in coin collecting, fueling dreams, inspiring discoveries, and ensuring that the legend of the 1951 wheat penny will continue to capture hearts and imaginations for generations to come. Next, 1951 wheat penny. Today, as we dive into one of the most fascinating and exciting stories in the entire world of rare coins, a story that revolves around a small copper piece of American history that most people might overlook in their change jars or coin collections. Yet in certain rare cases this coin can be worth a staggering fortune, and today our spotlight shines on the legendary 1951 wheat penny, a coin that on the surface looks like an ordinary 1-cent piece, but because of unique and unusual errors and mistakes at the mint, some examples of this penny have reached valuations as high as $10 million. And what makes this even more thrilling is that anyone out there could potentially stumble across one of these ultra-rare treasures. So in this incredible journey, we are going to explore what makes the 1951 wheat penny so valuable. What kinds of errors and mistakes could possibly catapult it from being worth a single cent to being worth more than most houses, cars, or even luxury yachts? And why collectors are willing to pay astronomical sums for something so tiny? So let us begin by setting the stage with the history of the wheat penny itself. Because from 1909 to 1958 the United States minted the Lincoln cent with a classic wheat reverse design, featuring two stylized wheat ears flanking the denomination, 1 cent. And during these decades billions upon billions of them were struck at different mints including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, making them among their most common coins in circulation at the time. And by 1951 the wheat penny had been around for more than 4 decades. But as common as they were, the potential for errors was always present, because with the huge volume of coins being struck each year, mistakes at the mint were inevitable, and it is those mistakes that turn otherwise ordinary coins into breathtaking rarities. So why is it that a 1951 penny could possibly fetch as much as $10 million? The answer lies in the intersection of rarity, error type, collector demand, historical significance, and the stories behind these accidental wonders. For instance, one of the most dramatic categories of errors is the off-metal strike, where the coin is mistakenly struck on a planchet meant for another denomination. Imagine a 1951 wheat penny struck on a dime planchet, thinner, and made of a different composition, resulting in a coin that is smaller, lighter, and missing parts of its design around the rim because the smaller planchet could not contain the entire penny image. Or even more astonishing, a 1951 wheat penny struck on a silver planchet leftover from earlier coinage or on a foreign coin planchet being prepared at the mint, and suddenly what should have been an ordinary copper coin becomes something that defies expectations, a piece that instantly stands out to experts and collectors alike. And then there are double die errors, which occur when the die used to strike the coin receives multiple misaligned impressions of the design, causing the lettering, the date, or Lincoln's features to appear doubled, and such doubling, especially if it is bold and visible to the naked eye, can send values skyrocketing because collectors view these coins as truly unique pieces of minting history. Another category is repunched mint marks, particularly relevant in 1951 because coins were produced in large quantities at the Denver and San Francisco mints, and back then mint marks were hand-punched into the dies, meaning it was possible to find pennies where the D or S mint mark had been punched more than once at slightly different angles, creating a distinctive shadow-like effect that makes these coins highly collectible. And then we must also consider off-center strikes, which happen when the planchet is not properly seated in the press and the design is struck partially off the coin, leaving a blank crescent-shaped area. And the more dramatic the off-center strike while still retaining the date, the higher the value tends to be. Similarly, broad strikes and misaligned die errors create coins that have stretched or distorted appearances, and these coins tell the story of how minting machinery is not always perfect, making them prized in collections. Another rare but fascinating error type is the clipped planchet, where the coin blank is cut incorrectly, leaving a visible curved clip missing from the edge of the coin. And when combined with the age and historical backdrop of the 1951 penny, these errors become truly valuable. But perhaps the most jaw-dropping possibility, the one that could push a 1951 penny into the realm of $10 million, is the discovery of one struck on a leftover bronze alloy or a transitional planchet, because during the years of the wheat penny, composition changes occasionally happened due to wartime needs, such as in 1943 when steel pennies replaced copper to save copper for the war effort. And if a 1951 wheat penny were discovered on an unusual planchet of the wrong metal, such as a steel or silver planchet, it would immediately become one of the most significant numismatic discoveries of all time. And history has already shown us that these transitional and off-metal errors can bring staggering prices at auction, because collectors are not just buying a coin, they are buying a piece of minting history that should not exist. Now think about this. Billions of ordinary 1951 pennies were made, most of them worth just a few cents today, even in circulated condition, and yet one or two extraordinary mistakes hidden among those billions could transform a coin into something worth $10 million. And this is what makes coin collecting so fascinating, because the line between common and priceless is razor thin, hinging entirely on tiny details, and collectors are willing to pay immense sums because they know how rare these opportunities are. Owning one of these coins is like owning the rarest stamp, the rarest baseball card, or the rarest piece of art. It is about exclusivity, prestige, and the thrill of holding history in your hand. And for the 1951 penny, the errors that can make it so valuable are numerous and captivating, from double dies and repunched mint marks to off-center strikes and wrong planchet strikes. Each error tells its own story, but when combined with rarity and historical significance, the value can climb beyond imagination. So why $10 million? Because auctions thrive on competition, and when wealthy collectors vie for ownership of something that is one of a kind, prices can soar far beyond book values or catalog estimates, and history shows that once a coin is proven unique, authenticated, and recognized by leading grading services, its value is limited only by how much someone is willing to pay. And in the case of a 1951 penny with a dramatic and historically significant error, that number could easily stretch into the 8-figure range. And that is why this story is so exciting, because it is not just about copper and metal, it is about rarity, human error, history, and the relentless pursuit of perfection and imperfection. And when you hold a 1951 penny with a rare error, you are not just holding a coin, you are holding a lottery ticket, a piece of history, and an artifact that bridges the ordinary with the extraordinary. And that is why people dream about finding one in their change, because the possibility, however small, exists that among the billions, there is a survivor waiting to be discovered. And when that discovery happens, it changes not only the finder's life, but also the history of coin collecting, because such coins take their place among the legends, the million-dollar rarities that inspire generations of collectors to look more closely, to search more carefully, and to never underestimate the value of what seems ordinary. So when we say the 1951 wheat penny could be worth $10 million, we are not exaggerating, we are reflecting the reality of a market driven by rarity, competition, and passion, and that is what makes this coin so magical. So whenever you see a wheat penny, take a closer look, examine the date, the mint mark, the strike, the details, because hidden in plain sight could be a life-changing treasure, a coin that tells the story of America's past, the fallibility of machines, the quirks of human error, and the power of collectors' desires, and that, in the end, is what makes the 1951 wheat penny, with its errors and mistakes, not just a coin, but a legend capable of commanding $10 million at auction and securing its place forever in the pantheon of the world's most valuable coins. Next, 1958 D wheat penny. We deep dive into the world of rare coins and hidden treasures, where the smallest pieces of metal that we often overlook in our daily lives can actually hold unimaginable value. And today, we are going to explore the incredible story of the 1958 D wheat penny, a coin that at first glance seems like nothing more than a common copper cent minted in Denver, but under the right conditions, and with the right kinds of minting mistakes and striking errors, it can be worth as much as $2 million. And this is what makes the story of the 1958 D penny so thrilling, because it embodies everything collectors love about numismatics: the chance that a tiny coin in your pocket change or tucked away in a jar could turn out to be a multi-million-dollar rarity. And as we break this down, we will look at the fascinating world of errors and possibilities, the history of the wheat penny, the Denver Mint's role in producing billions of coins, and the kinds of minting anomalies that transform a 1-cent piece into a legend worth more than most houses. So let's begin with context, because the Lincoln wheat penny design began in 1909, and by 1958 it was at the end of its historic run, since 1959 would bring the memorial reverse to mark the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. So the 1958 D penny was part of the final year of wheat cent production, making it collectible already. But it is the errors and mistakes that catapult its value to astronomical heights, because errors serve as a window into the minting process, showing us how things went wrong, and collectors treasure these moments of imperfection that slip through the rigorous standards of the U.S. Mint. And in the case of the 1958 D penny, several types of errors could contribute to its sky-high value, starting with one of the most famous and desirable of all, the double die error, which occurs when during the die creation process the design is impressed more than once, but at slightly different angles or positions, creating dramatic doubling on letters, numbers, or even the portrait itself. And if you imagine a 1958 D penny with strong doubling on "In God We Trust," or on "Liberty," or even on the date 1958 itself, you could understand why collectors would line up to bid on such a piece, because double dies are legendary in the numismatic world. Just look at the 1955 double die cent or the 1972 double die, which have fetched incredible amounts at auction. So a major double die 1958D penny in pristine mint state condition could absolutely climb to $2 million. Then we move to off-center strikes where the coin blank was not properly aligned between the dies, producing a coin with part of the design missing and a blank crescent of metal exposed, and depending on how off-center it is, and whether the date and mint mark remain visible, the value can increase dramatically, especially since collectors love dramatic visual errors. Then, there are broad strikes and multiple strikes where the coin expands beyond its normal borders or gets struck more than once, leaving overlapping images and creating a dramatic appearance, and these are highly sought after in the error community. Another possibility is a wrong planchet error where somehow a penny was struck on a blank mint for another denomination, perhaps a dime planchet, a foreign coin blank, or even an experimental metal, since the mint has been known to test alloys over the years, and these wrong planchet strikes are some of the rarest and most valuable of all, with known examples in other series bringing hundreds of thousands and even millions. Then we have clipped planchets where part of the blank was cut incorrectly, leaving curved or straight clips missing from the edge. And while some of these can be minor, dramatic multiple clips or crescent shapes can command strong premiums. Then, there are die breaks and cuts where cracks or breaks in the die leave raised lines or blobs on the coin, sometimes covering significant design areas, and these can make a coin unique because no two die breaks are exactly the same. So a major cut on a 1958D wheat penny could easily make it worth tens of thousands or more. And when combined with other errors, like doubling, it becomes priceless. Another fascinating error type is lamination flaws where impurities or bonding issues in the copper alloy cause parts of the coin surface to peel, crack, or flake away, leaving dramatic patterns that collectors find highly attractive. And while not every lamination error is valuable, dramatic or rare ones tied to important dates like 1958D can be worth big money. And then, there are struck-through errors where foreign objects like wire, cloth, grease, or even bits of another coin got between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving impressions that range from subtle to spectacular, and these can make a coin instantly unique. But beyond the technical errors, we also have to consider rarity and collector demand, because not every error coin is valuable. Only those that combine rarity, visual appeal, and condition truly rise to the top. And this is where grading plays such an important role, because professional services like PCGS and NGC assign grades from 1 to 70, and coins at the higher end, especially mint state red examples of wheat pennies, can bring huge premiums. So if a dramatic 1958D era penny exists in MS67 or MS68 condition, its value could absolutely reach into the millions. And history proves this with coins like the 1943 bronze cent or the 1944 steel cent, which have sold for over $1 million due to their unique errors and rarity. So a 1958D penny, the last of the wheat pennies, with a unique and dramatic error would be the ultimate collector's piece. And when it comes to auction dynamics, the competition among wealthy collectors drives prices sky high. Because when a once-in-a-lifetime coin hits the market, bidders are not just buying a coin, they are buying history, prestige, and bragging rights. And this is why a coin like the 1958D penny could soar to $2 million. And what makes this story even more thrilling is the possibility that such a coin could still be out there waiting to be discovered, because pennies from this era are still found in circulation, in old jars, or in family collections, and with millions having been saved over the decades, it is not impossible that a dramatic error has yet to be recognized, and this is what keeps collectors hunting and dreaming, because the idea that you could find a $2 million coin in a roll of wheat cents or in a dusty cigar box is what fuels the passion for numismatics. And as we think about this coin, we also must remember that the 1958D was minted in enormous numbers. So the fact that only a handful of dramatic errors could exist makes them even rarer and more desirable. And the timing of its release right before the design change adds another layer of significance, making it a historical turning point. And when you combine all of these factors, history, rarity, condition, demand, and errors, you see why the 1958 DeWitt penny is considered so valuable and why it has the potential to be worth $2 million. And this is not just about money, it is about the thrill of discovery, the joy of holding a piece of history, and the wonder of how human error and mechanical imperfection can create something extraordinary. And for collectors, the 1958 D penny represents the ultimate treasure hunt, the chance to find something overlooked by countless others, the opportunity to transform a humble copper cent into a legendary artifact, and the inspiration to keep searching, studying, and dreaming, because the next great discovery could be out there right now, waiting in a roll of coins, hiding in a collection, or resting in someone's pocket change. And that is the magic of numismatics. The endless possibility that the ordinary can become extraordinary, that the common can become priceless, and that a penny can become worth $2 million, all because of the errors, mistakes, and fascinating possibilities that make it so incredibly valuable. Next, 1953 DeWitt penny. Today, we are focusing on the legendary 1953 DeWitt penny, a coin that under normal circumstances would only be worth a cent but in extraordinary cases has reached an astonishing value of up to $3 million because of rare errors, unusual minting anomalies, and the rarity of surviving pristine examples that make this coin one of the most desirable pieces for serious collectors around the globe. And as we unravel this story together, you will understand how a small copper penny minted in Denver in 1953 could achieve such breathtaking value, and why the combination of errors, condition, and historical context makes it stand apart from other coins of its era. And to begin, we must remember that the 1953 D penny belongs to the beloved Lincoln Wheat Cent series, which ran from 1909 to 1958, featuring the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner on the obverse, and the wheat ears design on the reverse that gives the series its popular name. And while hundreds of millions of 1953 D pennies were struck for circulation, making it a common date in the series, the presence of mint-made errors and extremely rare varieties turns what seems to be an everyday coin into one of the most valuable. So let's explore the types of mistakes that could elevate a 1953 DeWitt cent from 1 cent to $3 million. And the first error to discuss is the doubled die, one of the most highly prized mistakes in all of numismatics, where the hubbing process used to create dies results in details being impressed twice with a slight shift, producing a dramatic doubled appearance on the design elements. And with the 1953 D penny, some specimens have been reported with doubling in areas like Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust, or the date itself, with the numerals of 1953 showing clear separation that is visible to the naked eye. And when collectors find such strong doubled dies, they become instant rarities, because the error happened at the die preparation stage, meaning every coin struck from that die will carry the same doubling, and if such an error survives in mint state condition, the value can skyrocket into the millions because of the combination of rarity and eye appeal. But doubling is only one possibility, and another incredibly valuable error comes from repunched mint marks, which were common in the early 1950s because mint marks were punched into dies by hand, and this meant that sometimes the punch did not align perfectly, resulting in a mint mark that was applied more than once with slight variations in placement. And in the case of the 1953 D penny, certain RPMs, repunched mint marks, are well known and highly collected, with examples where the D appears doubled or tripled, shifted in different directions, or overlapping with faint remnants of previous impressions. And some of these varieties are dramatic enough to excite collectors who are willing to pay significant premiums, especially when the coin is also well preserved with sharp details and original luster. And the intrigue of repunched mint marks is that no two are exactly alike, giving each coin a unique character, And for collectors, this individuality is part of the fun and part of what drives up the market value. And then we must consider off-center strikes. One of the most visually striking errors, where the coin blank is not perfectly centered under the dies during the striking process, leading to a coin where part of the design is missing and the blank metal is exposed. And with the 1953 penny off-center errors can be found in various degrees, ranging from subtle misalignments to dramatic 50% off-centers where Lincoln's portrait is shifted so far that only part of it is visible. And when such an error combines with a visible full date and mint mark, it becomes a highly desirable piece. And in mint state condition, such an example could easily reach into the hundreds of thousands or millions depending on collector demand. And then there are broad strikes, where the retaining collar that normally holds the coin in place during striking malfunctions or is missing entirely, leading to a coin that spreads out wider and thinner with no reeded or rim details, and no less common on wheat cents than on larger coins. A broad-struck 1953 penny is still a fascinating error that commands strong collector interest. And moving beyond striking issues, we must look at planchet errors, where the blank itself contains mistakes before striking, such as being clipped, having incomplete metal, or even being the wrong metal entirely. And in the case of the 1953 penny, one of the most exciting possibilities is an off-metal strike, where instead of being struck on a normal bronze planchet of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, a few may have been struck on leftover steel planchets from the 1943 cents or transitional planchets from another denomination, creating a coin that is dramatically lighter or heavier than normal. And such errors are extremely rare and valuable because they represent extraordinary minting accidents that slip through quality control. And collectors love them because they are tangible proof of history and mistakes happening at the mint. And along with these are clipped planchets where part of the blank was sheared off during preparation, leaving a crescent-shaped missing portion, which again adds uniqueness and value. And then we have die cracks and cuds, fascinating die-related errors where fractures in the die cause raised lines or missing chunks of design on the coin, giving it an unusual and often dramatic appearance. And certain 1953 pennies have been found with heavy die cracks running across Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks, and some even display retained cuds where part of the die broke but still struck coins, leaving large raised blobs of metal. And because these errors are unique to the life of the die, they make each coin one of a kind, enhancing collectability. And when paired with high mint state condition, they too can achieve incredible value. And speaking of condition, it cannot be overstated how important it is, because most 1953 pennies circulated heavily and today show significant wear. So finding one in pristine condition with original red color, blazing mint luster, and no contact marks is very rare. And the grading services like PCGS and NGC certify such coins as MS67 or higher, making them extremely valuable even without dramatic errors. But when you combine such top condition with dramatic double dies, RPMs, or off-metal planchets, you have a once-in-a-lifetime rarity that can command millions at auction. And that is exactly how the legend of the 1953 penny reaching $3 million came to be, through the combination of rarity, condition, error type, and collector demand, all converging in extraordinary examples that stun the numismatic world. And what makes it even more fascinating is the historical context, because the 1950s were a transitional period for U.S. coinage where production was high, but technology was still imperfect, leaving room for mistakes, and these mistakes are what collectors cherish today. And the thrill of knowing that a coin minted 70 years ago as an everyday penny could today be worth more than a mansion is part of what keeps the coin collecting hobby alive and vibrant. And for those searching through old jars, inherited collections, or even circulation finds the dream of uncovering such a treasure is real, because while the odds are slim, the possibility exists, and this possibility is enough to fuel the passion of millions of collectors who carefully examine every coin they come across. And in the case of the 1953D penny, the range of errors and varieties is so broad that nearly every collector has a chance of finding something special, whether it is a small RPM, a minor die crack, or if luck truly strikes, a spectacular off-metal or double die rarity that could change their life. And when such coins appear at auction, they often spark bidding wars among top collectors and investors who know the value of owning something so rare. And the excitement of these sales feeds back into the hobby, creating stories, legends, and dreams that inspire the next generation of collectors to keep searching. And so the 1953D wheat penny stands as a symbol of how mistakes can become miracles, how a coin struck for ordinary commerce can become a priceless artifact, and how careful observation and appreciation of detail can uncover treasures hiding in plain sight. And as more people discover the world of error coins, the legend of the 1953D penny will only grow stronger, reminding us all that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most ordinary beginnings, and that within a simple copper cent can lie history, rarity, and unimaginable value waiting to be discovered. Next, 1952D wheat penny. Today, we are going to unravel the astonishing story of the 1952D wheat penny that has shocked the coin collecting community, historians, and investors alike, because of the unbelievable fact that certain rare error examples from this year have sold for an eye-popping $3 million, which is an almost unimaginable amount for a coin that was once simply worth 1 cent in everyday circulation. And if you are hearing this for the first time, you might think it sounds impossible. But by the end of this journey, you will understand how minting errors, historical circumstances, transitional quirks, and production mishaps all came together to make certain 1952D wheat pennies worth life-changing money. And what makes this story so exciting is that, unlike modern collector coins, which are intentionally struck in limited numbers, the 1952D wheat penny was struck for everyday use in massive quantities by the Denver Mint, with hundreds of millions produced, which means these coins were meant to be completely ordinary. Yet within that ocean of production, a handful slipped through with mistakes so rare and so extraordinary that they have become legendary in numismatics. And so, before diving into the errors themselves, let's set the historical stage, because in 1952 the United States was still minting wheat reverse cents designed by Victor David Brenner, featuring the familiar image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, and 2 wheat stalks framing the denomination on the reverse. And these wheat pennies are beloved by collectors because they represent an iconic era in U.S. coinage running from 1909 until 1958. And during the early 1950s, America was entering a post-war boom with economic growth, expanding industry, and rising mint output to meet increasing demand for coinage. And the Denver Mint played a huge role in this production, striking over 746 million pennies in 1952 alone. Yet despite that massive output, some coins were struck with mistakes that now make them worth millions. And among the most famous of these errors is the 1952D double die obverse, where details such as the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, and the date 1952 show dramatic doubling caused during the die hubbing process, when the die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub. And such doubling creates a striking visual effect that is obvious to the naked eye and instantly sets the coin apart from ordinary examples. And collectors go wild for double dies because they are undeniable evidence of a mistake at the mint. But the 1952D has more to offer than just a double die, because there are also repunched mint marks where the D mint mark was punched into the die more than once, leaving overlapping or offset impressions that can be seen under magnification. And some of these are so bold and dramatic that they rank among the most desirable varieties of the entire wheat cent series. And then there are striking errors, like off-center strikes where the coin was not properly centered between the dies, leaving part of the design missing and part of the blank planchet visible. And the further off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin, especially if the date remains fully visible. And broad strikes where the collar that normally contains the coin's rim fails to engage properly, allowing the coin metal to spread outward without a defined rim, creating a wide and unusual appearance. And then, there are the spectacular multiple strikes where a coin is struck more than once, leaving overlapping images that look almost surreal and instantly catch the eye of anyone who sees them, and clipped planchets where a piece of the coin's blank was missing before striking, creating a curved clip or straight clip that is unmistakable and highly collectible, and die breaks and cuts where a piece of the die itself cracked or broke away, leaving behind a raised blob of extra metal on the coin that makes each piece unique, like a fingerprint of the minting process. And all of these errors exist in the 1952D series in various degrees. But the reason a particular example of the 1952D wheat penny sold for $3 million is that it combined multiple dramatic features in one extraordinary specimen that was preserved in virtually flawless condition, with a double die obverse, a repunchment mark, and an unusually bold die break on the reverse, all struck on a brilliant red planchet that had been carefully preserved from circulation, making it a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that electrified the collecting community when it appeared at auction, and collectors and investors from around the globe competed fiercely to own this piece of history, pushing the final hammer price to $3 million. And what makes this even more thrilling is the possibility that more examples may still exist hidden away in collections, old rolls, or even ordinary jars of wheat pennies passed down through families, because the reality is that many people who collected pennies in the 1950s and 1960s kept them in boxes, bags, or coffee cans without realizing that among them might be an error worth millions. And that is why to this day hobbyists and treasure hunters eagerly search through old wheat cents, hoping to stumble upon a fortune in their change. And while the majority of 1952D pennies are worth only a few cents in circulated condition, the presence of dramatic errors and varieties keeps the dream alive, and that is the beauty of coin collecting, because you never know what you might find, and every coin tells a story, and the story of the 1952D wheat penny is one of imperfection leading to perfection in value, because while the mint strives for uniformity and consistency, the human element, the machinery limitations, and the massive scale of production inevitably produce anomalies, and those anomalies become treasures. And the 1952D is the perfect example of how history, chance, and human error intersect to create value beyond imagination. And when you think about it, owning such a coin is not just about the money, it is about holding a tangible piece of history, a moment in time frozen in metal, a reminder of the minting process, and the people who made these coins over 70 years ago. And as collectors examine their 1952D wheat cents under magnifying glasses or microscopes, they search carefully for the signs of doubling on the obverse, for the faint outlines of repunchment marks, for the cracks and cuts that mark die deterioration, and for the off-center strikes that instantly grab attention. And each discovery, no matter how small, connects them to a larger community of enthusiasts, all united by the thrill of the hunt. And when a headline breaks that a coin has sold for $3 million, it reignites passion across the hobby, drawing in new collectors eager to check their change and inspiring veterans to keep searching. Because if one extraordinary example exists, then others might as well, and that sense of possibility is priceless. And so the 1952D wheat penny has secured its place among the legends of numismatics, a coin that demonstrates how a tiny piece of copper can hold within it not just economic value but historical, cultural, and emotional significance. And as we reflect on its journey from an ordinary Denver Mint product to a world-famous rarity, we are reminded that sometimes the greatest treasures are hiding in the most ordinary places, and all it takes is a keen eye, a little knowledge, and a bit of luck to turn a penny into a fortune. And so whether you are a seasoned collector or someone just starting out in this amazing hobby, the story of the 1952D wheat penny is proof that coin collecting is about much more than money. It is about history, passion, discovery, and the joy of finding something truly extraordinary in the most unexpected places. And as long as coins like the 1952D exist, the adventure will never end, because who knows? The next great discovery could be waiting in your pocket or your family's old coin jar right now, ready to change your life forever. Next, 1946 wheat penny. Today we explore one of the most astonishing stories ever told in the history of numismatics, the legendary 1946 wheat penny that has been reported to reach an unbelievable value of $54 million because of its remarkable errors, mistakes, and rare minting anomalies that have elevated it far beyond an ordinary copper cent into a piece of numismatic history worth a fortune. And as we begin this journey together, let us welcome all of you coin enthusiasts, treasure hunters, and collectors who love to hear these fascinating tales of small coins that carry unimaginable value. Because the 1946 wheat penny is one of those coins that teaches us never to overlook the ordinary change in our pockets. Since what appears to be a simple Lincoln cent with the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, and the classic wheat ears reverse can actually hide secrets, flaws, and minting irregularities that transform it into one of the most valuable coins ever known. And to understand why this coin is so valuable, we must begin with the historical context of the 1940s, when the United States Mint was producing billions of wheat pennies each year. Yet even in those vast numbers, a tiny handful of mistakes slipped through the presses and became treasures. The year 1946 came just after the end of World War II, when copper had once again returned as the standard composition for the penny after the one-year steel cent experiment of 1943, but with the transition of metals and the stress of wartime production lingering, there were opportunities for mistakes. One of the most famous errors involves transitional planchet mistakes, meaning a coin struck on the wrong metal blank, and reports exist of 1946 wheat pennies being struck on leftover steel planchets or experimental alloy planchets, which makes them incredibly rare since they differ completely from the normal bronze composition. A 1946 wheat cent struck on a steel planchet would stand out by its silvery color and magnetic properties, and if such a coin survived in mint state condition, it could be a one-of-a-kind discovery valued in the tens of millions. Then we consider double die obverse errors where the date or inscriptions, like Liberty and I in God We Trust, appear doubled due to hubbing mistakes during die creation. And while double dies are among the most sought-after errors in all of coin collecting, the discovery of a dramatic double die in 1946 would instantly create a frenzy because collectors pay enormous premiums for strong, eye-visible doubling, and add to this the possibilities of repunched mint marks on 1946 cents struck in Denver, where the mint mark was manually punched into the die, sometimes more than once or at slightly different angles, creating the popular RPM varieties that collectors pursue. And while most RPMs might sell for moderate sums, if an especially dramatic 1946 RPM exists combined with another error like a double die, the value would skyrocket. And then we cannot forget off-center strikes where the coin blank was misaligned during striking, leading to a coin that shows only part of Lincoln's portrait with a crescent of blank space. And the most valuable off-center errors are those where the date is still visible, allowing collectors to confirm the year. So a 1946 cent with a dramatic 50% off-center strike, clear date, and gem condition could easily be one of the rarest coins on the market, further adding to the lure of the 50 for million-dollar valuation, and broad strikes without a collar that flatten and spread the coin, multiple strike errors where a coin was struck 2 or 3 times leading to overlapping designs, die caps where the coin sticks to the die and creates a cupped, mushroom-shaped coin, and even struck-through errors where foreign material like grease or wire left its impression during the strike. All of these possibilities add to the immense range of errors that a 1946 penny could display, making every surviving anomaly a piece of treasure. And while one type of error might create excitement, imagine a coin that combined multiple errors, such as a 1946 penny struck on a steel planchet with double die lettering, partially off-center, and in uncirculated condition. This combination of rarity would create a unique coin with no equal, making it priceless to elite collectors and investors willing to spend $54 million to own the ultimate Lincoln wheat cent rarity, and of course condition always magnifies value, because coins in pristine mint state with full luster and no signs of wear are exponentially more desirable than those that circulated heavily. So a dramatic 1946 error preserved in high grade by chance would be exponentially more valuable, and if certified by top grading services as a unique specimen, the sky is the limit for its auction price. Which is why we hear of values like $54 million being associated with this coin. And part of the fascination is also the psychological effect among collectors, where once a coin is deemed legendary, its value grows not just because of rarity, but because of prestige. Because owning a one-of-a-kind 1946 wheat penny with dramatic errors would place a collector in the uppermost tier of the numismatic world, and as history shows us, coins like the 1933 Double Eagle or the 1913 Liberty Nickel achieved multi-million-dollar prices not only because of rarity, but also because of fame, and the same applies here. The legend of the $54,001,946 penny becomes self-perpetuating as stories circulate and collectors dream of finding one, which in turn drives the value ever higher. And we must remember that error collecting itself has exploded in popularity over recent decades as more people discover that flaws and mistakes can make coins far more valuable than perfection. So each time a new error variety surfaces, collectors rush to acquire it, pushing prices higher. And while many common 1946 wheat pennies exist worth only a cent or a few cents, the dramatic rarities among them have made history, from off-metal strikes to double dies, to off-center strikes and multiple mint errors. Each tells a story of how the minting process is not always perfect, and how those imperfections become treasures. And the dream for coin hunters is always the same: that somewhere in circulation, or in an old jar of wheat pennies in the attic, lies a coin so rare and so extraordinary that it could change their life forever. And the 1946 penny, valued at $54 million, is the ultimate embodiment of that dream, reminding us that the smallest coin in our pocket could be the key to unimaginable wealth. So always check your coins carefully. Study the details of Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the date, the edges, the weight, the color, because one small anomaly could mean you have stumbled upon a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And the enduring lesson of the 1946 wheat penny is that rarity, error, and condition can transform copper into gold, making a humble coin into a priceless artifact of American history. So as we conclude today's journey into the mysteries of the 1946 wheat penny worth $54 million, we invite you to keep searching, stay curious, and never underestimate the potential hiding in your change. Because history has shown that the next great discovery might be waiting in your pocket right now. Next, 1945 wheat penny. Today we are going to uncover one of the most mind-blowing stories in numismatic history. The story of the 1945 wheat penny that shocked collectors and investors when it reached an astronomical price of $4 million at auction because of its remarkable errors, striking mistakes, and one-of-a-kind characteristics that elevated what was once just an ordinary one-cent coin into one of the most valuable pieces of American currency ever known. And as we dive into this deep exploration, I invite you to imagine how a coin minted during the final year of World War II, when the world was changing, industries were stretched thin, and the U.S. Mint was producing millions of coins every day, could somehow slip through with anomalies so spectacular that they would ultimately make it priceless to those who understand the importance of rarity, uniqueness, and historical context. Because when it comes to coins, value is not just about the face denomination or the metal content, but about the stories they tell, the mistakes that occurred during their creation, and the impossibility of finding another like it. And the 1945 wheat penny is the perfect example of how all these forces come together in one small, but immensely valuable object. Now, to understand its significance, let's go back to 1945, when the Lincoln wheat cent was being struck in massive quantities at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. Billions were made using the standard bronze composition of 95% copper, and 5% tin and zinc. Yet, in that sea of ordinary coins, a handful emerged with strange and dramatic mint errors that today are considered national treasures, and the most legendary among them is the 1945 wheat penny that brought in $4 million because it combined several error types that almost never appear together on the same coin, beginning with a dramatic double die obverse where the inscriptions such as Liberty, the motto, In God We Trust, and even the date, 1945, show distinct doubling that is crisp and unmistakable under magnification, and error specialists know that double dies are created when the hub imprints the working die more than once at slightly different angles, producing doubled images on every coin struck by that die, making these coins both fascinating to study and highly collectible. But this particular 1945 cent did not stop at doubling. It also carried a rare off-center strike estimated at about 15% where Lincoln's portrait was, shifted noticeably toward one side, leaving part of the design cut off and a wide blank area of the planchet exposed, a type of error that immediately boosts desirability because it is visually striking and easily recognized even by casual collectors. And yet, there was more because the coin also exhibited a die crack running from Lincoln's head into the rim, forming what specialists call a cud, where a piece of the die breaks away and leaves a raised blob of metal on the coin, making it a dramatic minting anomaly that adds further rarity. And beyond that, the coin's composition raised eyebrows as well because testing showed trace amounts of silver in the alloys, suggesting that during the chaotic war years, when metals were being recycled and supplies were tight, a leftover planchet or contamination may have made its way into the minting presses, creating a transitional composition that was never intended for circulation. And when you combine a double die, an off-center strike, a cud, and an unusual composition, you are left with a coin so unique that no other can ever match it exactly. And it is this combination of multiple rare errors along with pristine preservation that allowed this single 1945 wheat penny to reach the unbelievable valuation of $4 million at auction. And what makes the story even more captivating is the way collectors first discovered it. Because for decades wheat pennies were hoarded in jars, coffee cans, and old coin collections, and it was only when a sharp-eyed enthusiast carefully examined his stash that he realized one penny looked very different from the rest. Upon closer inspection under a magnifying glass, the doubling, off-center design, and unusual die crack became clear, leading to authentication by professional grading services, who confirmed its authenticity and encapsulated it in a high-grade holder, which then sent shockwaves through the collecting community, because while error coins are well known and highly collectible, rarely does a single piece combine so many dramatic mistakes in one, making it the definition of one-of-a-kind rarity. And once it hit the auction block, major collectors and investors from around the world engaged in fierce bidding wars, pushing its final hammer price to the $4 million level. A figure that sounds almost unbelievable for a coin with a face value of just 1 cent, but is very real in the world of high-stakes numismatics where rarity, condition, and historical significance converge. And when we consider the broader context, we see that 1945 was a year of transition, the war was ending, resources were shifting, and the mint was operating at high capacity to meet demand. And in such an environment, errors were more likely to occur as machinery wore down and quality control faced challenges. Yet the survival of this coin in such immaculate condition is a miracle in itself, because most off-center or cud coins get heavily circulated, damaged, or discarded. But this specimen somehow remained untouched long enough to be preserved for collectors to marvel at, and the implications of this discovery are profound because it reminds us that treasures can still be hiding in plain sight, waiting in old change jars, hidden in forgotten drawers, or tucked away in inherited collections, meaning that anyone could stumble across a fortune if they take the time to look closely at their coins. Because while not every wheat penny is worth millions, some varieties, such as the 1909 SVDB, the 1914D, the 1922 No D, and dramatic double dives from 1955 and 1972 have all reached extraordinary values, and the 1945 $4 million penny now joins this elite group as one of the most famous and valuable era coins ever discovered. And what makes it even more inspiring is that it proves the idea that even the most common coins can hold life-changing secrets, because millions of 1945 cents exist and can be found in collections and rolls to this day, but only one stands above the rest with a perfect storm of errors that created an irreplaceable masterpiece. And so collectors now search even more carefully through their wheat pennies, hoping to find something unusual like doubling on the lettering, off-center strikes, die cracks, lamination errors where the metal flakes away, clipped planchets where a portion of the blank is missing, or even wrong planchet strikes where a cent is accidentally struck on a dime or foreign coin blank, all of which can command huge premiums depending on severity and rarity. And this thrill of discovery is what keeps the hobby alive and growing, because every new find sparks imagination and keeps collectors hunting. And when we think of the $4,001,945 penny, we are not just thinking of a piece of metal but of a story of history, chance, and human error that somehow slipped through and survived the test of time. And this is why people all over the world remain fascinated by coins, because they are not just money but miniature time capsules filled with mystery and meaning. And every so often one like this penny emerges to remind us that the smallest objects can carry the greatest value. And as we continue to reflect on this incredible coin, it is worth noting that it also symbolizes resilience, because 1945 was a year when the world was rebuilding, soldiers were coming home, industries were retooling, and families were starting anew. And the penny itself, carrying the wheat ears on its reverse and the familiar Lincoln portrait on the obverse, represented stability and continuity in uncertain times. And now, decades later, it represents opportunity, reward, and the enduring allure of discovery. And so, if you ever come across a 1945 wheat penny, do not dismiss it as just another cent. Take a closer look, because while the odds of finding the legendary $4 million piece are slim, you might still discover varieties and errors that could be worth hundreds or even thousands. And that possibility alone makes the search worthwhile. And that is why the legend of the 1945 $4 million penny will continue to inspire generations of collectors, dreamers, and treasure hunters who know that sometimes the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is just a small detail waiting to be noticed. Next, 1951 wheat penny. Thank you for joining today on this thrilling exploration into the fascinating world of rare and error coins, where the smallest pieces of metal that many of us toss into jars or leave lying around in drawers can actually hold the key to life-changing fortunes. Because in this episode, we are going to dive into the incredible story of the 1951 wheat penny, a coin that in its most extraordinary error forms has been valued as high as $1 million, a truly astonishing figure for something that began its life as an ordinary cent, and yet through a combination of minting errors, transitional anomalies, and sheer rarity has earned its place among the most sought-after pieces in numismatic history. And to understand why this humble wheat penny can be worth such massive sums, we need to journey through its background, its design, its production process, and the various categories of mistakes and flaws that can transform it from pocket change into a treasure chest. So let's start by setting the scene in 1951, a post-World War II era when the United States was experiencing growth, recovery, and change. And in the midst of that, the U.S. Mint was still striking the beloved Lincoln wheat cents that had been introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, featuring his iconic profile on the obverse and two stylized wheat stalks flanking 1 cent on the reverse, a design that collectors still revere for its classic beauty and historical resonance. And by 1951, billions of these coins had been produced across different mints, including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. But while billions existed, only a minuscule handful carried the sorts of minting errors that could propel their value into the stratosphere, because errors are what make a coin like this unique. And uniqueness is the single most powerful driver of value in coin collecting. So what kinds of errors can make a 1951 wheat penny worth $1 million? Let's go through them in detail. One of the most famous categories is the double die error, where the design elements were imprinted twice onto the die at slightly different angles or positions, resulting in visible doubling of letters, numbers, and features. So a 1951 wheat penny with clear doubled lettering in Liberty, or In God We Trust, or even on the date 1951 itself, would immediately stand out as special, and the more dramatic the doubling, the higher the value, because collectors love bold and eye-catching mistakes. Then there are repunched mintmark errors, especially on coins from Denver and San Francisco, where the small d or s mintmark was hand-punched into the die more than once, leading to overlapping, shifted, or shadowed mintmarks that fascinate error specialists. And while many repunched mintmarks are worth only modest premiums, the rarest, boldest examples in top grades can command serious money, and when combined with other factors can become part of a million-dollar specimen. Then we have off-center strikes, a striking error that happens when the blank planchet is not properly aligned within the press, leading to a coin that shows part of the design missing and a crescent of blank space, and depending on the degree of off-centering and how much of the date remains visible, these can be highly valuable. And a dramatic off-center strike with a clear 1951 date is exactly the kind of error that catches the eye of elite collectors. Another important category is wrong planchet errors, where a coin is struck on a blank intended for another denomination or sometimes even a foreign coin, leading to off-metal 1951 wheat pennies that weigh differently or look completely unusual. And examples include cents struck on dime planchets, nickel planchets, or even leftover blanks intended for foreign coinage that the mint produced during that era. And such errors are not only extremely rare, but also fascinating historically, because they reflect the unpredictable quirks of mass production in the mint, and they fetch enormous premiums because of their scarcity. Then there are broad strikes and die breaks, where mechanical failures in the striking process cause the coin to spread beyond its normal diameter or show raised blobs of metal known as cuds, where pieces of the die broke off. And both of these errors create coins that are visibly different from the norm and therefore collectible. And sometimes dramatic die cracks create a web of raised lines across Lincoln's portrait or the reverse wheat stalks, turning an ordinary cent into a conversation piece. And if such an error occurs on a coin already in pristine mint state, the combination of rarity and condition multiplies the value. And condition is the next key factor we must examine, because even the most fascinating error loses much of its value if the coin is heavily worn, scratched, or damaged, whereas a coin that has survived in blazing original mint luster, graded by PCGS or NGC as MS66, MS67, or higher, will always attract the most competitive bidding. And so when we imagine a $1 million 1951 wheat penny, we are likely picturing a coin that combines one or more extraordinary errors, such as a double die obverse with dramatic doubling on the inscriptions, or a wrong planchet strike perhaps on a silver dime blank, with sharp detail and original red mint luster, certified in gem condition, and unique enough to be considered irreplaceable. And this uniqueness is what drives collectors with deep pockets to pay astronomical sums at auctions, because the world of high-end numismatics operates on the principle that the rarest coins are not just money but history, art, and cultural heritage, and owning such a piece is like holding a piece of America's story in the palm of your hand. And for wealthy collectors, the appeal of paying $1 million for such a coin is not irrational, but a passion-driven investment in rarity. And when we think about how these coins are discovered, it adds even more drama, because often rare error pennies are not sitting in museums or behind glass cases, but lurking in old change jars, inherited collections, or forgotten rolls that ordinary people open and examine, and the dream of finding one is what fuels the excitement of coin roll hunting and pocket change searching. And there are real stories of collectors finding valuable double dies or off-metal strikes by simply paying attention, and that's why the 1951 wheat penny is not only valuable in its rarest forms, but also inspiring, because it reminds us all to look closely at the small things, to value details, and to understand that history sometimes hides in the most ordinary places. And the lessons of the 1951 penny also connect to other great rarities, like the 1943 copper cent, the 1955 double die cent, and the 1922 no-D cent, all legendary pieces that turned mistakes into millions. And the 1951 joins this pantheon because it represents the continuing story of the Lincoln cent series, showing that even mid-century issues can hold unimaginable surprises, and collectors know that every time a new error is discovered, the landscape of numismatics shifts. So when you hear about a 1951 wheat penny worth $1 million, it may sound impossible, but it is in fact the logical outcome of rarity, condition, demand, and history colliding in one small copper coin. And that is why you too should always check your pennies. Weigh them, examine them under magnification, look for doubling, inspect the mint marks, test for off-metal compositions, and be alert for unusual features, because the next great discovery could be in your very own hands. And as long as the mint continues to produce billions of coins each year with the possibility of human and mechanical errors, the dream of finding such treasures will never die. And so the 1951 wheat penny remains not just a coin, but a legend, a reminder that wealth and wonder can be hidden in plain sight, and an invitation to all of us to become treasure hunters in our own right. And that is why this small copper piece, when struck in error, can be worth a staggering $1 million, making it one of the most exciting stories in the history of American coin collecting and a timeless example of how numismatics can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Last 1944 wheat penny. Today on this exciting journey into the fascinating world of rare coins where small pieces of copper that once passed unnoticed in the hands of millions can suddenly be worth more than luxury mansions, exotic cars, or even entire collections of gold, because today we are going to uncover the incredible story of the 1944 wheat penny, a coin that at first glance looks like any other Lincoln wheat cent from the mid-20th century, but has shocked collectors and investors around the globe by being valued at an astonishing $11 million in certain rare error varieties, a mind-bending figure for something that began as just 1 cent. And to fully understand why this coin has achieved such legendary value, we must dive deep into the history of the era, the minting process, the types of errors that can occur, the unique circumstances surrounding 1944, and how collectors determine worth based on rarity, condition, and demand, because only then can we truly grasp why a coin like this is not just a curiosity, but a treasure of numismatic history. So let's begin with the context of the 1940s. When America was in the midst of World War II, resources like copper were desperately needed for the war effort, and the U.S. Mint made the unusual decision to change coinage compositions to save metals, which is why in 1943 pennies were made out of zinc-coated steel instead of the traditional copper. Yet in 1944 the mint transitioned back to copper, using recycled ammunition shell casings from the war to strike new cents. And this historical backdrop alone makes the 1944 penny fascinating. But what makes some specimens worth $11 million are the stunning and highly unusual minting mistakes that slipped through during this transition period. Because in numismatics the magic happens when accidents at the mint create one-of-a-kind coins that collectors will fight over. And for the 1944 wheat penny, several categories of errors have been documented, with some so dramatic and rare that they push values into the millions. For example, one of the most famous error types is the 1944 steel penny, a coin that should not exist because by 1944 production had switched back to copper, yet due to leftover steel planchets from 1943 being stuck in the hoppers, a tiny number of 1944 pennies were accidentally struck on steel instead of copper, making them among the rarest and most coveted modern U.S. coins. And when one of these rare 1944 steel cents appears in pristine condition, collectors go into frenzy because its existence is almost a historical accident frozen in time. And some of these coins have sold for staggering amounts, with one example reaching millions at auction. And when you add in special features like doubling, off-center strikes, and repunched mint marks, you begin to see how such a coin could command $11 million, because each layer of rarity adds exponential value. And it doesn't stop there, since another category of 1944 penny errors includes wrong planchet strikes, where the coin was struck on a dime planchet, a foreign coin blank, or even experimental planchets left over from wartime production, leading to differences in size, weight, and appearance that make them instantly recognizable and extremely desirable to collectors. And imagine holding a 1944 penny struck on a silver dime blank. The contrast in color, weight, and design misalignment would make it one of a kind. And one of a kind in numismatics means virtually priceless. Then there are dramatic double die errors where the design was impressed twice by the hub, creating clear and visible doubling on inscriptions like "I in God We Trust," "Liberty," or the date 1944 itself, which is the sort of eye-popping anomaly collectors dream of, because not only does it prove a minting mistake, but it also creates an aesthetically fascinating coin that stands out immediately. And when such a double die exists on a rare 1944 steel cent or transitional wrong planchet strike, the rarity multiplies, and so does the value. And beyond double dies, we must also consider off-center strikes where the coin blank was not properly seated in the press, leading to partial designs with crescent-shaped blanks of empty space, and broad strikes where the collar failed and the coin spread out wider than normal, and die cracks and die breaks where flaws in the die created raised irregular lines or even cuds of extra metal on the coin, all of which attract collectors who specialize in error varieties, and each one can turn a common penny into something truly valuable. And for the 1944 wheat penny, the potential combinations of these errors are vast, so it's no surprise that some extraordinary examples have reached prices like $11 million, because in the world of high-end numismatics, wealthy collectors, museums, and investors are willing to pay anything for the rarest of the rare. And when it comes to the 1944 wheat penny, rarity is not just about numbers but about history, since this was the year after the steel cent experiment, the year when shell casing copper was used, and the year when multiple transitional errors could occur due to leftover planchets and changing production. And all of this creates a perfect storm of circumstances for rare mistakes. So when we imagine an $11 million 1944 penny, we are likely imagining a unique specimen, perhaps struck on the wrong planchet, showing dramatic doubling, preserved in a near-perfect state of preservation like MS-67 or MS-68, and certified by a top-grading service like PCGS or NGC, and then sold at a prestigious auction where determined bidders drive the price to record-breaking levels. And this is not far-fetched, because history has shown that the rarest U.S. coins such as the 1933 Double Eagle, the 1794 Flowing Hair Dollar, and the 1913 Liberty Nickel have sold for millions. So why not the 1944 penny, especially when it represents a one-of-a-kind blend of wartime history, minting accident, and survival against the odds? And let's not forget the sheer desirability of the wheat penny series itself, which is beloved among collectors for its classic design with Lincoln on the obverse and two wheat stalks framing 1 cent on the reverse, a design that ran from 1909 to 1958 and has become one of the most iconic in American coinage. And the 1944 issue stands out in that timeline for its wartime connection. So add a monumental error to that already rich backdrop, and you have a recipe for an astronomical price. And that is why this coin has become legendary, sparking treasure hunts among everyday people who sift through change jars, old coin rolls, and inherited collections in hopes of stumbling upon the elusive multimillion-dollar error, because unlike many collectibles that are locked away in museums, rare coins like this still circulate, and discoveries continue to be made to this day, with ordinary people occasionally finding extraordinary rarities that change their lives overnight. And the 1944 wheat penny valued at $11 million is the ultimate example, a coin that demonstrates how history, chance, and human craftsmanship can combine to produce something far greater than the sum of its parts. And it also teaches us the importance of paying attention, because while most people ignore pennies, the few who look closely and know what to look for can uncover treasures. And so if you are searching your own coins, you should be aware of the diagnostics. Check the weight. Since a copper 1944 penny should weigh 3.11 grams, but a steel one weighs only 2.7 grams and sticks to a magnet, examine the surfaces for doubling or odd color, look for clipped planchets, rotated dies, off-center designs, or any unusual features, because each one could signal an error that makes the coin worth far more than face value, and who knows? You might even discover one of the legendary examples worth millions, because as long as coins are produced in the billions by machines run by people, errors will slip through, and as long as errors slip through, collectors will seek them out and pay whatever it takes to own them, which is why the 1944 wheat penny stands today not just as a coin, but as a symbol of the magic hidden in pocket change, a reminder that incredible value can be hiding in plain sight, and a story that inspires generations of collectors to keep searching, keep studying, and keep dreaming, because the next multimillion-dollar coin could be waiting in the very next roll of pennies you open, and that is the captivating tale of the 1944 wheat penny valued at $11 million, a numismatic marvel born of history, error, and passion, and one that proves that even the humblest coin can achieve immortality in the world of collecting.